righty. Well, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on wherever and whenever you are listening. I always start with gratitude and thank everybody for choosing to turn into the Perspectives on Leadership podcast brought to you by Fire Engineering. My name is Steve Shaw. I'm your host. I'm a deputy chief with the Town of Jupiter Fire Department, and I'm honored to be part of the Fire Engineering family as an author, presenter as FDIC, and host for this podcast. So you always have your choice of what to listen to, and I always say this, but thank you for choosing to listen to this podcast. I'm honored to be having this platform. I'm honored to continue doing my best to offer value to the fire service. I want to thank Diane Rothschild, David Rhodes, and the Clarion team for allowing me to continue to bring this value, and especially thanks to my fire chief, Chief Donato, for allowing me to continue having this platform to interact and learn from our brothers and sisters in the fire service. So, like many of you, I attend a ton of conferences, classes, seminars, and all that jazz. And through these, we get to meet a lot of people, right? And they come in all shapes and sizes, from all kinds of capacities, all across the fire service spectrum, whether they're students, co-instructors, the leadership team behind the conferences. You get to meet a ton of people, right? And some of the people I talk to the most are those that I've met through these conferences and these types of events. So one of these individuals is Lindsay Judah. So Lindsay is a chief officer in Florida on the other side of the state from me. So I get to see the sunrise and she gets to see the sunset from where she's at. We've ironically traveled in the same circles through the years, having attended the same conferences together, been in the same classes. And she's one of those people that when I think about the conferences and places I'm going to, I just know I'm going to see her there at some point. So I saw her earlier this year in January at the Florida Fire and EMS conference, and we were just talking, connecting and whatnot. And I said, you know what, it's probably that time to get her on the podcast and just talk shop and also talk about all the things she's involved with, because she's, as I put it, involved in a very eclectic amount of groups in the fire service, and she's a big advocate for us. Anyway, so as I was preparing for this, and before I introduce her, there was three things that were going through my mind as I prepared for the podcast. The first things first is being an advocate and not just a spectator. So what does that mean? So I was doing some research and I was going through old podcasts and old FDIC keynotes, and I came upon Aaron Fields, one of my favorite FDIC keynotes. And he mentioned that we are this industry's advocates and ambassadors. And I thought about, what does that mean in terms of just being a spectator, someone just watches and clicks like and all that kind of stuff? What is the next level of that? So I did what most, people of today do. I went to Chatbot AI, or I went to AI and looked up what does that mean? So an advocate, per Chatbot, is a person who actively supports, promotes, or speaks in favor of a cause, policy, individual, or group. They work to influence public opinion, raise awareness, and sometimes provide direct assistance or representation to help advance the interest of those they support. I like that. I dig that. And as you'll get to see from Lindsay's perspective, I think she fits that mold. She's an advocate for it. She's involved. She's putting in work. The second thing I was thinking about is surrounding yourself with good people. I was reminded of a quote by Jim Rohn, who's an entrepreneur, author, motivational speaker. And he says, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that had me thinking about who are we intentionally spending time with, and who are we intentionally spend time talking with, engaging in conversation and dialogue. Quite frankly, Lindsay's one of those people I enjoy talking to because I feel like she gives me good counsel and we have good conversations. Third thing I was thinking of is, what does being a student of the fire service look like to you? And I think many of us have said that comment, I'm a student of the fire service. I say it often. And I think, well, what does that mean? What does that look like in real time, in actions, in your lifestyle? What does that look like? And I think that one of the goals of today's podcast is to kind of cover that and celebrate ways that we can be involved in the fire service and be a true student of the fire service. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a combination of not only action, but also lifestyle. So we'll dive into that as well. Anyway, so I want to introduce Lindsay. Dr. Lindsay Judah currently serves as a rescue chief for a fire service in the West Florida area. She is a fire and emergency service consultant, a graduate professor, an advocate for NFR for cancer, which we'll definitely talk about, a committee member for the Firefighter Mayday Survey, which I definitely want to dive into, a peer reviewer for the CPSC, and an IFSTA validation committee member for the Hazardous Materials First Responder 7th edition and for the Chief Officer 5th edition. She's an NASM certified personal trainer and trained in peer support through numerous agencies. So I'm very happy that she's had the time to join me today. So thank you, Lindsay, for being here, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chief. I really appreciate having an opportunity to be on the podcast with you. I have to say the Leaderships on Perspective podcast the Perspectives on Leadership podcast is the podcast that I listen to most frequently of all of the fire service podcasts that I listen to. And I've really enjoyed listening to the guests that you've had on the show.
No, so first of all, I appreciate that. So for you, what has been your path in the fire service? What does that look like? Where did you start, and what does that look like today?
So my path in the fire service started as a fire explorer with Post 952 with St. Petersburg Fire Rescue. After I served as a fire explorer for a couple years, I ended up going to Fire Academy and EMT school, and I ended up getting hired in Tallahassee. So I served there for several years. I worked as a firefighter EMT, a firefighter paramedic, an engineer, and a lieutenant in EMS and training. And then I moved over to Claremont Fire Department and served as a training captain for 3 years. And then I served on St. Pete Beach for a year and a half. And then I turned to the consultant world. I did that for a year. So I've done fire and EMS consultant for a couple years now in the background, now serving as a rescue chief in Metro Fire Rescue Agency in Florida.
Well, I think that, like I said before, when I did the intro, it's one of those things where I'm glad that we're able to connect through the conferences we've been to and the people we've interacted with. And you've always been a person that I've always leaned on for counsel at times, and I definitely appreciate that. So I mentioned this before, but I think that I use the term surrounding yourself with good people, right? And I'd say you do that pretty well. When I look at the people you're hanging out with, I see this really diverse, amazing mix, all the way from like high-level executive chief officers like Dr. Lori Moore Morrell, all the way to like the rugged boots on the ground studs like Basil in Orlando doing his thing, right? And I don't know if the word eclectic is the word, but I'll just use that because I think it's a cool word to use. So when we were talking, I know recently I was talking to Basil about the Firefighter Mayday Survey, right? And I was just happy to see people on the list that he's coordinating with. And then when I saw your name there and Aaron Heller and Walt Lewis, and I'm like, man, what a phenomenal group to put this together. So, I mean, let's break some of this down. First of all, since we mentioned it, talk to me about the Mayday Survey and how you got involved with that, what your role is in there. And I want to drop a little bit on that because I'm an advocate of it. So let's talk about that for a second. What does that look like?
Sure. So Basil reached out to several of us and asked if we'd like to participate in bringing life back into the Firefighter Mayday Survey. Chief Don Abbott did a lot of work before he died, and several of us had an opportunity to actually listen to Chief Abbott's presentation on Mayday surveys. And so in order to bring that back, several of us got together. We started working on that mid-year last year. And Walt Lewis is definitely on that group. I know that you've had him on the podcast previously. And we're working to acquire as much information as possible from individuals who are willing to share their Mayday experiences. They can participate in providing survey information, even if the Mayday occurred several years ago. If they certainly encounter those situations in more recent time, we would like to see that as well. Our goal is to have the first 100 report out by the end of the summer. We're just under 100 now. I think it's around 90. So we're looking forward to being able to share some information. We're not trying to interpret the information that's shared. We're truly trying to just disseminate the information that's shared with us from the surveys.
I want to pause there for a second because when Basil and I talked about this last year, we talked about what it looked like and also how it was similar to and differed from the rescue survey. In one, you're asking a fire department in the rescue survey, for example, to basically celebrate their wins. Hey, we got to grab. Let's go through the details. And that the information from that has been just nothing short of phenomenal, right? But what we're asking here is just so different, right? You're asking somebody you can look at it different ways, but one may say that you're asking somebody to air their dirty laundry. Like, oh crap, we had this moment. and now you want us to talk about it. So could you just talk a little bit about how that looks like from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think that's actually contributed to the lack of participation so far, as people are reluctant to share that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really a mindset shift. The more opportunities we're vulnerable with one another within the organization, but also across the fire rescue agencies, we can learn from one another and help protect one another from having similar experiences. So the intent is not to share anything related to a specific organization. It's generalized content when we're identifying a career organization, maybe the state that they were located in, but nothing related specifically to that incident. And so I think that's important for individuals to know. I do understand that there may be some hesitation if leadership within an organization doesn't support the information being shared. That might be a challenge. I don't know if that's something that some firefighters are experiencing, but we definitely would love for people to share that content. And it is really interesting because the platform was set up. Basil worked really hard with the Firefighter Rescue Survey to identify the practices that they used and the report method that they used to be able to share the information. They have since published a book with a lot of the content. And so I think that we would love to be able to get to that point, but we definitely have to have the participation from folks in the industry to be able to share and learn from.
Well, you mentioned a key word there, vulnerable. And the fact that you got 90 plus already, that's right there, a win. It's a huge, huge win for those that have offered up that information. I know even right now, let's say it just stopped. Right there, you got 90 Maydays you can learn from. How valuable is that? But in terms of the vulnerability, that starts from the top. I can remember doing a lot of after action reports in my previous agency in Fort Lauderdale. And, when you get a bunch of people together, talk about what went right and more specifically what could have been better, it's harder to draw that information out. But conversely, if you have somebody that's respected and one of the higher ranked individuals in the list, like I had a division chief at the time who was very vocal about, I did this right, but where I could have done better? I could have done this better. And once he did that, that gave permission for the entire group to do the same thing. So when I think about this, once the door starts opening up, they see that the information you're using is valuable, is constructive. It's not negative in nature. I think it's just going to be a continual process. So I'm excited that you're involved with this. This is going to be amazing, right?
Yeah, we're really excited about the project, and we hope that we can continue to build momentum and learn from one another.
Yeah. So some of the other things you're involved with, and I don't mean to drop shameless plugs, but I don't care. It's okay. I like dropping shameless plugs. One of the things we were talking about recently is like everything from some of the committees you're involved with to the National Fire Academy. And let me start there with the National Fire Academy. I wish that I had not gone to the National Fire Academy for the first time just a few years ago to start my EFO program, because if I would have gone earlier, I would have been there a lot more. There's just so much history there. There's so many great people. The instructors are phenomenal. What's been your experience there from the National Fire Academy side?
So one fascinating fact that is shared on the USFA website is the NFA was actually built on an all-girls school. And I think that's fascinating. We have fewer women in our industry, but that is where we learn as a group at the National Fire Academy. So I think from my experience attending, I went to the Women in Fire and National Fire Academy weekend there a couple years ago. I've been to the EFO and Leadership Symposium there, and I'm also currently attending the EFO program. I just finished the first course, and I'll go to the second course in February. I definitely think that more individuals should attend the NFA. The application process is relatively simple. The application process is currently open. It's open every couple months so that you can apply to attend. They actually show vacancies for classes. So if the classes are being offered in the next couple weeks, you can check out the vacancy list. And if there's a class that you've been trying to attend that you couldn't get into for some reason and the dates align, you could head up to the NFA and take that class.
Yeah, I go in my last class this October. Actually, I'm a little bit. I wouldn't say I'm upset at the NFA. I was upset that my class in April was the same week as FDIC this past year, so I couldn't go, and then they
Mm.
canceled it because of
Oh,
whatever. It doesn't matter. I was a little bit upset about that. I may have said a few bad words over the course of a few weeks, but anyway, things happen for a reason. I'm going back in August, and everything will be fine. But to your point, yeah, there's a lot of the networking, the different perspectives from people across the country. What a phenomenal way to meet people and learn, right? Um, so yeah, I'm definitely an advocate for that as well. Um, some of the other things you're involved with, and one of the things we talked about, and I didn't have a chance to dive into it deeper. You mentioned like the scholars group, like the science to the station area that you're involved with. What does that look like?
yeah. So the summit that has gone on at the USFA the last couple of years, I believe that that's actually where Science to the Station kind of originated. There was a rollout of individuals in the industry trying to help disseminate information to fire stations around the country. And so Science to the Station is that mechanism. Dr. Janke and several others are a part of that initiative. And the Scholars Group is a part of Science to the Station.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually a opportunity to attend the Science to the Station. I believe it's in Loveland, California in just a couple months. Excuse me, Loveland, Colorado in just a couple months. And the Scholars Group itself is several individuals with terminal degrees or those who are aspiring to have terminal degrees, maybe a master's degree. And we're encouraging individuals to join the group so that we can help individuals that are possibly completing their EFO research or they're pursuing their dissertation and need guidance. And one of the other things that we're doing with that is the researchers, there is so much research going on in our industry that we're trying to make sure that that research actually makes it to the kitchen table for individuals to be exposed to and learn from, as opposed to all the researchers having the content and it never really making it to the boots on the ground. Because I think that is somewhat of a challenge for us right now. The pace of information is so quick these days, but I'm not sure if all of the really quality information that is from the researchers is making it to the kitchen table. And so that's something that we're trying to bridge the gap on.
Yeah, I'm actually writing that down. The challenge of getting that data to the kitchen table. That's a huge thing. But you're right in terms of the research, and it's nice to see that. And I'll go back to the rescue survey, for example. For me personally, like the best example I always go to is like VES. The fact that some of the rescue survey data is proving and supporting things like VES, which in some areas may not be so highly looked upon. But when you look at the data and how well that skill works and the low amount of the high amount of people that can be rescued from it and the low amount of injuries and all that kind of jazz, it's validation. It's validating, and I think that when you have a piece of data like that that's out there that helps prove what you're doing in the field works, it's nice. It's helpful. And you're right. In terms of the research that's done out there, there's so much good stuff out there. So I love that you're working with that, trying to get that to the table, because I think there's more research been done. Somebody told me that there's more research been done in the last 20 to 30 years than the last 200 years. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds about accurate.
Yeah. So I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma right now for the IFSA Research Symposium that's being held on Saturday. And it is free for individuals to attend. They just need to get to Tulsa, Oklahoma to be able to attend. But a bunch of researchers get together to help share information. And I think it's an undiscovered gem in our industry. People may not even be aware. And in addition to the research symposium, IFSA validation committees take place generally in Tulsa and Oklahoma City through Oklahoma State University. And it's great work. If individuals have any interest in validating textbooks, it's the textbooks that we start reading when we're in Fire Academy and then continue on throughout our careers. You can actually contribute to the textbooks that are distributed throughout our industry through validation committees. So that would just require individuals to check out the website and see what validation committees are open for application, and then they would submit applications for topics that interest them.
I love that. And that kind of brings me down another thought process, which, again, going back to the keynotes from FDIC, I always remember the one from Chief Rhodes in 2024, where he kind of goes off, I wouldn't say goes off on a tangent. He really focuses on the fact that there's a lot of people out there. He calls them revolutionaries, right? All these groups and whether it's training groups, social media groups, whatever, but that they're out there and they're posting pretty powerful questions or powerful quotes or just challenging some of the norms. But his challenge to them was these revolutionaries need to infiltrate the institutions. In other words, he's calling them out like, listen, we love you. You're out there. Great. What else are you doing? How are you getting involved into these larger institutions and meshing the two, And when you look at some of the big players that are out there jumping onto these groups that are doing a lot of the research, that's what they're talking about, that meshing of the two, right? So I love that you're covering that. I think there's a need for that to be something that we look into, whether it's like you said, maybe through IFSTA, reviewing books, because those books are going to the fire academies, they're going to FO1 programs, they're going to these programs. Well, if you have a problem with them, do something about it. If I have a problem with the way somebody's, cutting an overhead door, well, I'm not going to bitch about it unless I'm going to the source and trying to help offer alternate perspectives, those kind of things. So I like that you're heavily advocating for that, let's say.
Yeah, and I think one way that people can get involved to participate, even at the local level, is considering participation in the NFFF Advocate and Fellow program. There are so many opportunities that you can learn from the Everyone Goes Home program and actually teach the information after attending Train the Trainers, and then travel around the country and visit at conferences and participate in life safety summits. And that is another way to mesh. We have individuals we talk about, I think later on we may discuss more on succession planning, but I was introduced to that program and truly it changed my life. The first time I knew about the NFFF EGH Advocate program was around 2019. And I've had so many opportunities. You talk about the eclectic group of people that I get to connect with and learn from and share ideas with. That was really the start of it. So I think that the more individuals that participate in those types of programs, the better off our industry will be. There's also what I call like rainy day training, or maybe in some other part of the United States, a cold or snowy day training. The Fire Hero Learning Network has several opportunities for education just from online platform, but it's really professionally done videos. A couple of us had an opportunity to go shoot a video in Nashville, Tennessee a couple of years ago, and it talks all about challenges in leadership. And if you Google FHLN fire, it'll come up, and it's all free.
No, I'm glad you're mentioning these things. And, I guess, in the early part of my career in South Florida, I was one of those guys that was behind his walls. All I knew was the local scene. All I knew was what I needed to know. And I guess that's a double-edged sword. In the South Florida area, I don't want to brag, but we do things pretty good. And you don't need typically to leave your area to get all that you need. There's so many conferences and access to school and programs and all that kind of jazz. But I'm glad I left the walls to see what else is out there, whether that's going to FDIC or other conferences or other states, and just experiencing different perspectives, different tactics, and then having good conversations about why, who, when, what does that look like? And it challenges you sometimes, but it also gives you different perspective. So I'm glad you mentioned that. One of the other things we kind of talked about earlier, and we were talking about notes and whatever, we were sort of broaching the idea of, and this kind of goes along with succession planning, but like nominating individuals for awards or scholarship opportunities. And that had me kind of stop right there, because I love writing my folk up for awards. I love recognizing them. I think that people like you and me, we're in that phase in our career where we transcended us. Like, it's no longer about us. We've got the t-shirt, we got the awards, we got the plaques. We're done. We're done with that. Now it's about, how do we serve our people? How do we build them up? How do we get them to get whether it's an accolade or an attaboy or a scholarship to something, whatever that looks like, right? But what I found frustrating is, and I've run a bunch of committees in the past through various outlets, I got to tell you, it's so hard to get people to nominate people for awards. I don't know what it is. I remember working for several groups, having to resend out emails or cold call departments and go, dude, this nomination's open. Just nominate somebody. I know you got people you know that can be up for this award. Why aren't you doing it? So let's talk about that for a second.
So that's definitely something I've been passionate about for several years. I remember when I was in EMS and training in Tallahassee, there was an opportunity to submit names for State EMT and Paramedic of the Year. And so I reached out to several individuals because I honestly didn't want it to come from me. I thought it would be most helpful if it came from someone within the organization that said, hey, this is a real standout and I think they should be recognized. And so that's how I acquired the 2 names we put in for EMT and paramedic. And the EMT was selected that year, and they got to go to a conference for MSAC and get recognized and have dinner. And I just think that those types of opportunities can really reinvigorate people and re-energize them and remind them, yes, you're here to help people and you'll be recognized along the way too. I've had more recent opportunity to do that. And even when I was in Claremont, there were several individuals that I nominated, much like what you're describing. The LEPC has the Thomas Yatabe Award each year. And I wasn't sure if anyone else was going to be submitted, but I sure wanted to make certain that we submitted someone's name, and then they were selected for the award. And moving forward from there, several different opportunities through the LEPC and the Hazmat Symposium over in Daytona. We've ended up having opportunities to highlight folks. We recently had an individual within the organization highlighted for Paramedic of the Year for the state of Florida again. We're not from South Florida, but we're still doing a real good job, Chief. But I really think that that's an opportunity we can highlight our folks. And one challenge that I've seen for some individuals, it may feel like the same people are nominated repeatedly, and then it may take away from that experience of being able to recognize. So I think it's important to just have not diverse in any particular way, but a diverse group of people that are recognized for a variety of things. And I think that one way to really help identify those individuals is being very intentional throughout the year. You know, if somebody has a pretty critical call that they did a great job on, make a note of it. We have a program where we are able to track individuals' performance on a daily basis. I can give them feedback right away and say, you know, hey, they've done a great job today and it was specific to this incident. So if we are looking for opportunities to highlight people later, we're able to just open up their evaluation form and look at all of the input throughout the year. And what's really neat about that program is the individuals actually get the feedback in real time as well. So within a week of something occurring, they're already seen and their supervisors can also input the information and see it that their employee was doing something exceptional. So I think any way we can highlight our personnel is beneficial for the entire team. And then we can bring things up to, we can bring them to council meetings. We can highlight them in news articles. This is a way to really highlight our industry and the positive things that we do to contribute to the community.
You know, you're saying this, and I want to stay here for a second because I think there's also an added advantage of really getting to know your people, determine what drives them. Like, for example, when we talk about recognition, and you know this as well as I do, and the people listening, you probably know this as well. Some people don't want awards. Some people do not want to get recognized. Some people are perfectly happy with a handshake, a pat in the back, and says, thank you very much. And that's all they want. I've had several people who I've either written up for award or knew they were getting something come up to me directly and go, I don't want this. Don't you put me on that stage. I hear you saying, thank you for your support. I'm out of here. Like, cool. It's amazing. But I have other people that absolutely want these awards because they want to put it on their resume. They want to rise the ranks. They want to put it on Facebook. That's fine too. Whatever, you know, to each their own, right? But I think regardless of their their reasoning or their purpose of whatever that recognition looks like, you get to know your people better. You get to know what makes them tick. And that's special too. I've also had a lot of people in which I've written an award for or some sort of recognition for. And let's say they didn't get the award that I wrote them up for. I may just show them, hey, listen, just wanted to let you know, you didn't get this, but this is what I wrote for you. That right there, I've had people go, wow, you wrote this for me? I don't care if I didn't get it. Thank you for even thinking about me. That's powerful too. Just the action of trying to recognize them, or just recognize them without them having to have a gold nugget on their wall or a plaque or a medal or something. That's powerful too. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there's something to dive into on that, of the recognition, and have we made it uncomfortable for people, not us specifically in the fire service, but as society, is it uncomfortable to be able to receive an award or acknowledgement for the things that we've done? I agree. I don't like to be in the spotlight. I love being able to put other people in the spotlight and highlight their work. One thing that I have shared is, for example, the individual who received the Paramedic of the Year award, his wife and son came to the recognition. I think it was very meaningful for them. So it may not mean, or it may be a little bit uncomfortable to receive the award for them, but the sacrifices that our families pay for us to serve in this industry, I think it is meaningful that we're able to bring them along and highlight them too. We included them in the pictures that we took to really spotlight, we know that you give your person to us, and we appreciate that.
Oh, you know what? I'm glad I try to keep this under an hour-ish most of the time. I'm glad I do that, because that right there, that whole concept of the idea that it's not about the individual, it's about more than the individual, it's about their family, and their family letting us have that individual for a certain amount of time, or a career that lasts 25, 30, 35 years. I think a lot of people, and I'm somewhat speculating, but I know it to be a fact, that a lot of people forget about the family and what they're sacrificing when their family member's away with us, and I have to give it to my wife. She reminds me of that quite frequently, to be quite honest. And I'm glad we've had these tough talks and these crucial conversations, and she's keeping me aware of that, aware of the family sacrifice. So I love that you said that. And you're right. When somebody gets up there, and their family's there, it's not about the individual. It's about that little boy or little girl seeing their mommy or daddy up there getting something, and the pride they feel, and the recognition the family gets for, hey, this was worth it. There's so much to break down there, Lindsay. There's a lot to break down there.
I had a flashback just this week. We're having a girls' camp, and I remember when I was in middle school, my mom was in the military, and she had a group of individuals come into the middle school and read to students that needed assistance. And I remember seeing her from across the hall. She'd be in her uniform, and I was just so amazed. And then just this week, I saw from the girls' camp, we have an emergency manager, and her daughter's in the girls' camp. And I was watching her. I'm like, that's a lived experience I've had. That is so cool. Because I imagine she's looking across the way at her mom thinking she hung the moon. And that is so special.
I like that word, the lived experience. I often use the word shared experience. But I think there's somewhat on the same vein right there in terms of the things we remember, those impactful moments that we can create. Some of these impactful moments happen by accident, they happen just by happenstance, but we have the potential to intentionally and deliberately create these shared experiences, these lived experiences. And that's so powerful. It's so powerful. One of the things I often ask people when I have them on the podcast, and there's several other things to talk about, but I want to ask this now because I think it's going to have us drift into other things. So are there any issues in the fire service that keep you up at night? Like, are there any concerns that you have that you just have in your mind a lot these days?
Time is so challenging, and I wish that I had more time with my team, and I'm constantly working on that. But I think it's so important for our personnel to see us and get to know us. I just had a conversation this week, and I was talking to a gentleman about connecting with the team and making sure from a rescue chief perspective that our personnel know that they're supported. And I said, at the end of the day, consistency is key. And I need to be able to look at my people in the eye and they know that I'm doing everything that we can to make sure that they're supported and we hear them. And so that's something that really does keep me up at night, because our personnel are very important to me and to many other leaders in our industry. And I think that sometimes I see things on social media that speaks completely to the contrary, and it's nerve-wracking for me because that's accessible to the public, and then there may be discord between what could be the individual's experience on the line and then the leadership's experience. And I just think that something that definitely keeps me up at night is connecting with our team, being supportive of our team. It's wonderful to be able to get out on occasion and connect and see outside of just like the county jurisdiction. But I do believe in the grass is green where you water it. And I think that that's very important too, is that we make sure that we're tending to where we serve and the community that we serve.
So there's a few things I wrote down there. So this is going to take a little while to unpack. So let's just start with one. First of all, I love that you started with time, because you and I both know as like administrative folk that oftentimes people go, what the hell are they doing up there? They don't do anything. And God bless them. God bless them for not knowing what we have to do. And you know what? That's okay. I'm happy people don't have to deal with the stuff we deal with in the administrative world, right? But that being said, it's still the optics, it's still the perception. So when you have those opportunities to get out there, that's so powerful, right? This reminds me of a story that one of my former colleagues, Chantel in Fort Lauderdale, told me. It's a great story. When she comes to work, it's a great analogy. She can make a left or she can make a right. So if she chooses to, let's say she has to get to the office and she wants to just get her work done. If she makes a right and goes up the elevator to the third floor, she can go right to her office, sit down, close the door, and nobody sees her. And she gets stuff done, she's working, and boom, she gets her day started like that. If she makes a left, she'll go through the bay, see all the trucks that are in the bay, the engines, the rescue, the battalion chief's vehicle, all that. She'll see the crews during shift of change, and they'll stop her, she'll talk, interact, share a cup of coffee, tell a story. Hey, what's going on? How's your family? How's your kids? And eventually she'll reach the other stairs on the other side. She'll go up to the second floor, go through the kitchen. And of course, she's going to spend an hour there. Hey, what's going on? What's going on with this? What's going on with that? And she gets the pulse of the station, the pulse of the crews. It may take her an hour to 2 hours to get from point A to point B up to her office. But what's the payoff? She's got to interact with people. They see her. They see her working. They see that she's there asking questions. She's interacting. She's taking the pulse. And then she gets back to her office. And listen, not every day you get to make the left or make the right. But I always remember that story because it's powerful. You get the choice sometimes to be impactful, to reach out to people. And it may take your time, but I think it's well worth it, right? And you also mentioned the word consistency. I think that's a powerful word. I took the time to interview all the battalion chiefs in Fort Lauderdale several years ago. I was working on something. I just had this in my mind. I wanted to just pick their brains, feel the pulse of them, because the battalion chiefs in our organization were that conduit, man. They were that conduit between admin and ops. And you had to talk to them a lot. You had to really get to them because they were your mouthpieces. And one of the things that so many of them said was consistency. They either missed it, they were struggling with it, they didn't have it, but they focused on the word consistency. So now, what do you mean by that? Like when I say consistency, where does your mind go?
I think that we have to remain very consistent in the approach, in the language we use when we're communicating with individuals. I definitely understand where you're coming from, a district chief perspective for our organization, but they are so influential, they're so informed, and they have different perspectives themselves. And I think that that can cause some challenge too I describe it to our personnel as like a radio dial. If there's a couple switches on the radio dial, I'm going to increase the bass a little, I'm going to decrease the volume a little. And every time we make those little adjustments, we end up with a different product. It may be similar, but it's different. And so I think that those types of things whatever we can do to dial in really and be on one sheet of music of with the content that's being shared with our personnel, I think that's helpful. And then that also translates to a similar lived experience across the shifts. I don't know if for your battalion chiefs, but it can end up being what feels like three different fire departments across the shifts based on the influence of the battalion or district chiefs. And that can be so challenging. So I think the consistency in messaging to them is important, making sure the expectation is set, certainly, and then allowing them the opportunity to give that feedback. It's so important for us to acquire feedback of what are their challenges and how can we support them. That's something I've recently talked about, even from an EMS supervisor perspective. I want to know what they're challenged with and how can we make it better.
I love it. Yeah, there's a lot there. There truly is, right? As we kind of come closer to the end of this, I wanted to talk a little bit about things like succession planning. And I mentioned before that you and I'm not saying we're the old folk in the room, but we've been doing this for a little bit, right? And I think we're both, as we've been talking about, thinking about our people. We're thinking about the people we work with. How do we build them up? How do we pass on what we have? How do we, talk about and implement things that involve or revolve around things like succession planning? And I know we've talked about this on the side, and we both kind of follow the same, let's say, individuals when we listen to podcasts and we've had these discussions, but where does your mind go when we talk about things like succession planning?
So I think a few things that cross my mind. You mentioned resumes. Even if people are nominated, that can be on a resume. If they receive an award, that can be on a resume. When I sit with my personnel and go over evaluations, I want to see their up-to-date resume, because I think that there are opportunities that may present themselves before individuals realize that they may land on their desk. And so if we're creating opportunities and pathways for them to succeed, we really need to be mindful along the way. Something can change on Monday that we didn't really expect. And so how are we positioning our people to be successful when those doors open, possibly unexpectedly? I really advocate for individuals completing classes. I advocate for individuals completing higher education programs. Locally, we have a great bachelor's program at St. Petersburg College for Public Safety Administration, and several of the individuals have completed it. I completed that several years ago myself. So I really encourage our folks to pursue opportunity. I remember when I first started in Tallahassee in orientation, the lieutenants at the time said, "We want you to complete every class that is offered, and we want you to complete every promotional assessment that you're eligible for." And I think that that's so important. I really took away from that. That was the expectation. Take the classes, participate in the processes, prepare yourself for the next role. I think that that's one thing that we really have to be mindful in leadership, is creating what we would say is a psychologically safe environment. One book name drop I'll give you is The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson. I think that information is very helpful. If we create an environment where individuals can fail forward, they can ask questions, they can be vulnerable. We do that also as leaders. Then we can create an environment where more people will participate in promotional assessments, and they will participate in acting in the next rank, and they will have an opportunity to shadow other individuals that they have interest in a role that they may be pursuing. One takeaway that I took from you many years ago, I can't remember if it was on a podcast. You said you had a +1 mentality. So at the time you were overseeing EMS too, we're always striving to make EMS sexy again and again and again. But that was during COVID, and you were put in this position, and your thought, from what I remember, your thought was, I'm going to get to know all of these people over the next year. And it was actually sped up. Fast forward, you had an opportunity to meet all of your contacts within like a 3 or 5 month period, but you are using a +1 mentality, which is something that I have really tried to engage within my own practice, is having individuals added to the space. If you're going to a meeting, bring them to the meeting. If you have an opportunity to bring someone that's serving as an EMS supervisor that day and the content in the meeting isn't unhelpful, bring them in so that they can hear and see what some of the administrators are accomplishing. That's one opportunity that I see, depending on the organization and their philosophies. Light duty can also offer that. If you have an individual that was injured, but they're capable of still attending meetings, that may be an opportunity where they can see what we're accomplishing. And possibly even in some meetings, their perspective may be helpful because they have the field perspective where we may not have that field perspective, or it's been quite some time since we were in the field to really offer real feedback on the pulse of what they're experiencing day in and day out.
Yeah. So a couple things just came into my mind. And so first of all, you mentioned evaluations. I was just giving my first evaluation to Rob Ramirez today, my training chief, right? And we were talking about evaluations, and I asked him, like, what's been your experience with evaluations? And he's like, it's been all over the place. I'm like, yeah, mine too. I can remember for me, I took evaluations very seriously. It was a chance to sit down with somebody, talk about the experience they've had in the last year, expectations, the whole 9 yards. And I remember giving an evaluation to one of my firefighters years ago, Stephanie. And after I gave her evaluation, this is when I was a lieutenant at 46, the next shift, this guy, Jason Bohan, one of the battalion chiefs, walks up to me and goes, hey, man, I need to talk to you. I'm like, what's going on? He said, I need to talk to you about that evaluation you give Stephanie. I'm like, what did I do? It was an excellent evaluation. What are we talking about? He goes, no. No one's ever given her an evaluation before. I'm like, what? He goes, you were the first person in a decade to give her like an evaluation and talk to her about expectations and all that stuff and reward her and all that stuff. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And then I found that pretty much is a common theme in the fire service, that a lot of people don't take evaluations seriously for what they could be. And let's not go down the rabbit hole about people carbon copying them, copy and pasting, forgetting to put the right name in evaluations. Yeah, that's a bad day if we keep talking about those. But you're right, evaluations are opportunities, and if you model that behavior, you're showing them what should be done, right? But the other thing is, you mentioned encouraging people to take classes and get educated. People like you and me, listen, we're school geeks. We like going to class. We like going to the everything from seminars to taking classes, right? I don't know what it is in our blood. We just like to do it, right? But what I found recently was pretty cool that I've seen out there. I was talking to Justin McWilliams relatively recently, and I've been trying to get him on this podcast to talk about a concept that he's been deploying on social media. And it's basically bring a chief for free thing. Like he's going to put on a class, and if you bring a chief, like a chief officer, chief of the department, they come in for free. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty cool idea. Trying to get the upper echelon, the executive staff into the mix and showing them what is being taught out there. I'm like, well, that's a good way to do things. I love that. And conversely, I'm looking at actually a ad right now for the Palm Beach County Fools. They got a mentor ticket for an upcoming class. The Art of Reading Smoke is being taught in September. Shameless plug. Again, another shameless plug, right? But on the bottom of it, it's a mentor ticket. Bring someone with 3 years or less on the job for free. Well, that's beautiful. I'm going to go to there and bring somebody. I mean, I love the way they're doing their best to promote bringing more people into the fold. I love that. But it sets a standard. It models behavior. It tries to again, the +1 mentality, right? So there's some actionable, things that people are doing to deploy these things. We could talk about it all day, but they're actually deploying it. And I think that's so powerful. So I'm glad you brought that up. So, as we get to the end of this, and I know we've been kind of flapping our gums and everything, I think that as I review some of the notes we've been talking about here, Lindsay, and please stop me if I hear if you hear anything here, but I love that we kind of covered a large gambit of what you're involved with. And you're just one example of a person that's got this interesting bandwidth across the board. But no matter what, no matter how you slice it, you're involved, you're doing stuff. And I don't mean to blow your skirt up or anything, but you're not just putting I'm on this committee to put it on your resume. You're involved. You're actively deploying stuff, and you're putting the work in. Everything from the Firefighter Mayday Survey to the NFA and to the Science to the Station and the NFFF, you're involved. And I think that's, again, sets an example, right? It's giving people examples of ways we all could and can be involved. You mentioned, you did mention something that I'm going to look into the future, the girls camp that you have. I got to tell you, I've seen several of those in our area. What a phenomenal opportunity to get more people, and especially the girls in our fire service, looking and reminding them that, hey, you can be a firefighter too. I love that. I love that.
Yes, because that's 50% of our population that we may not be engaging. And I think several of them do a great job in our industry.
Last thing I like that you said the time aspect of things. The importance of connecting with the team, and for people like us, like admin folk, it takes time. It takes energy and time and deliberate action to go down, have a cup of coffee, go to the kitchen table, make phone calls, interact with them, run calls, essentially get out of the office, right? But the return on investment there is just it's exponential, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of the succession planning, I love that we're thinking about that and talking about that. I think, I often, talking about the plus one mentality, I often ask myself the question, if I'm working on something and I'm not having someone right there next to me working on it, or delegating some part of this to somebody else, or maybe the whole thing to them so they get the credit and they get the experience of doing it, why not? Like, where's my plus one? Why am I working on a silo? If I'm working on something alone, my default response to myself is, what the hell are you doing? Where is somebody else watching you doing this with you in some way, shape, or form?
That's something that I've definitely been leaning into more recent is I see these opportunities for articles to be written, and I'm an advocate certainly for submitting articles to fire engineering and every other opportunity out there. Now I'm seeing things from a perspective of that would be a terrific article and highlight the organization, and I know the people that can do it. And so it's just a point of being able to connect them with the folks at Clarion or whomever, and making sure that they have the opportunity to write and be highlighted and then possibly go present, which is so fantastic because they can reach more people with their content.
So I love that you said that, because I'll give you an actual item. Max Lashin, okay, he works for Tamarack Fire Rescue. He's a captain over there, and he was showing me some stuff a while back, and I'm like, this would make a really good article, man. And I'm so happy because he texted me recently, showing me a thing that showed up in fire engineering based on our conversation. I'm so happy and so proud of him. But it just needs that little idea, a little nudge. Hey, listen, this might be a great article, and boom, he's out there. I'm just so happy for him and what he's doing. So he's also the president for the South Florida Fools. So I love just name dropping him. He's just a go-getter. But to your point, and I know Diane and David are going to love that we're talking about this, but yes, writing articles. And so many people are like, well, that's been done before. I don't want to write an article on that because that's been done before. Yeah, but you didn't write it. You may say it in some different way that somebody else is going to relate to or gravitate towards than somebody else the way they wrote it. And I can't express that enough. And I'm so glad you brought that up. Just because it's been done before, it hasn't been done by you. And I'm telling people out there, just take the chance, write the article, put the video out there, do something, and you'd be surprised. So I'm so glad you brought up the article part of this. All right, so we're coming close to the end here, Lindsay. So let's wrap this up. So as we start closing here, what are your final thoughts? Like, as we close the things we talked about, what are your final thoughts as we start wrapping things up?
Well, since I didn't mention it before, I'd like to at least highlight 3 of your podcasts that I think others should go and listen to. So the Perspectives on Leadership, Dr. Damon Simmons, Chief Walt Lewis, and Dave Rhodes. That we've got to listen to those. I think that there's so many good takeaways. There are some things that kind of overlap as much as we talk about in our industry. I think that Dr. Damon Simmons talks about so many things related to education and pursuing opportunity and really understanding the personnel within the organization. Chief Walt Lewis, I'm a big fan. He recently retired from Orlando Fire Department, but one of the things that he talked about on your podcast was not being a shirt hanger. It's such a simple term. I never heard it before until I listened to that podcast, but I think that that's so important of remembering why we're here, what we're doing, and what we can accomplish to support our people. And Chief Rhodes, I believe it was 2023's FDIC presentation. He talked about organizational leadership, and I have a time frame from that presentation. It's available on YouTube, but it's from minute, I think, 12 to 15. That was so memorable. And it was talking about how it may not always be the calls that we experience, but it definitely can be the leadership that we experience. And that's where I think it ties back to having the consistency and being good people. You mentioned at the beginning, surrounding ourselves with good people. And I thought about when we were going to have this podcast, I thought back to receiving handwritten cards from you around the holidays. And I'm certain that you've written cards for many people, but those are very memorable experiences to be able to go to the mailbox and have a card from somebody that is in your corner and supports what you're doing and sees you. And that's something that I certainly try to do as well. Handwritten cards to me is maybe a lost art to some, but I think that there's still a place for it. And making sure that people that we care about know that we care about them. The language is so important, and it can be handwritten, and sharing with the folks that we love. And I've received, cards from different folks to the department, and it's very memorable to hear from people and take the time, that is so limited, to be able to reach out and connect. And I think that connection, it will pay off in the long run.
I can't agree with you more. I think that's a great way to wrap things up and summarize everything. So, all right. Well, like I said, Lindsay, thank you for joining me today. I know our time is valuable, and you're a perfect example of this. You're at a conference right now in the hotel room trying to knock this out with your busy schedule. So I appreciate you spending your time with me, and I'm confident that people listening to this have gotten a lot out of this. So I thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. So as we kind of wrap things up here, as I say all the time, thank you for listening to the Perspectives on Leadership podcast. Second Friday of the month, the episode drops. We always try to take something in terms of leadership and dive into it. And I think we definitely accomplished that goal today. If you want to reach out to Chief Judah, Lindsay, what's the best ways to get in touch with you? If you want to just read that off real quick.
Sure. So I have a link tree. It's at Chief Judah, and I'm also available on LinkedIn.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you once again for being on the episode, and thank you for listening. Much appreciated. We will see you in the next one. Be safe out there. And until then, we'll see you then.